So moving right along in our portion, we're chapter 21, verse 2, and we're discussing the laws and the Mishpatim. So it says, we're up to verse 2, it says, Ki tikneh eved ivri, when you purchase a Hebrew slave, sheish shanim yavod, uvashviit yetzel chavshil chinam, and in the seventh year, he will go free. In the seventh year, he's going to go free. Now, just as an introduction to what Rashi is going to talk about, there's two types of slaves, or really there's more than two types of slaves. There's really three types of slaves. There's actually four types. There's a Canaanite male slave, a Canaanite female slave. And there's a Hebrew male slave and a Hebrew female slave. There's a very, very big difference between a Canaanite slave and a Hebrew slave. The Canaanite slave is really something that's very close to the modern understanding of slavery, although there were certain reforms that were not available, that were unknown in the ancient world, which the rabbis instituted. But then there was also the Hebrew slave, which was really more like an indentured servant or a low-wage worker, or like an apprentice. So this verse, which talks about the slave going free after 6 years, Rashi is going to tell us that refers to a Hebrew slave and not to the Canaanite slave, because the Canaanite slave does not go free after a certain number of years. He remains a slave. So Rashi tells us, Ki tikneh eved ivri, when you purchase a Hebrew slave, Eved shehu ivri. This is a slave that is a Hebrew. Maybe it is the slave belonging to a Hebrew, i.e. a Canaanite. So maybe it's a Canaanite. Maybe it refers to a Canaanite. Maybe that's a slave who works for 6 years. So and so what do I apply with the verse? And you shall bequeath them. Perhaps it applies to somebody who is bought from a non-Jew. But a Canaanite slave who was brought from an Israelite should go free at the end of 6 years. That's what I might think. Says the verse, Tamid Lomar, Ki amaker lecha achicha ivriya v'avatcha sheish shanim. If he will sell to you your brother, the Hebrew, or to the female Hebrew, or the female Hebrew one, and she will serve you for 6 years. This idea that he serves only 6 years, that only applies to the Hebrew slave, but not to the Canaanite slave. So the concept that he goes free after 6 years, that's the Hebrew slave, but not the Canaanite slave. Then it says in the verse, Ki tikneh, when you purchase, Ki tikneh eved ivri, when you purchase the Hebrew slave, Rashi says, who are you purchasing this Hebrew slave from? Miyad Beitin, from the hands of the court. Shemekaruhu b'gnei vaso. Yes, Mr. Sheckman. Jerry.
Yes. I think the Christians, I can't think of the word. They agreed to slavery, to the black slavery, based upon these laws in the Torah. I find that very, very disturbing.
Yeah, well, the Christians, they were reciting also the verse, often recited were the verses from Genesis, where it states that the descendants of Canaan, Ham, was going to be cursed with being a slave. And so that was cited. So yes, and there were unfortunately not only Christians, but also Jewish rabbis who supported the idea that the blacks were supposed to be enslaved. There were some who were against it, just like there were some Christians who were against it. So it was actually, it wasn't religion's finest moment at all when they were supporting the slavery in America. It wasn't the slightest. It wasn't any religion's proudest moment or best moment. And in fact, all the religions have a history of supporting slavery. So this is something that the Torah does allow, but the Torah, even though it does allow it, we're going to see that the Hebrew slave was something that the Torah was clear was not really a slave, and the rabbis say that. And even the Canaanite slave, the Torah tells us is supposed to go free if you do certain things to that slave. So this teaches us the concept that they recognize in this person a human being. But yes, it's an incredibly troubling passage, and it's difficult. I agree with you, Jerry. So, do you have a follow-up question, Jerry?
No. The word I was thinking of is justification. The world justifies slavery, or at least the Christians do on our Hebrew Bible.
Well, you know, and even that the when you say that today is Super Bowl Sunday, those who are fighting against modern day slavery say that Super Bowl Sunday is one of the biggest slavery days in America. Sex trafficking is a huge crime today going on in America, and they say Super Bowl Sunday is one of the biggest, most egregious violations of that. And so there is a lot of slavery to this day in America, and people need to be aware of that. But you're right; nobody's justifying it. But the problem was then it was being justified. So it says in the verse, go back to Rashi, Ki sikneh, when you purchase such a slave from the hand of the Miyah Bestin, Shemachru b'nitkinei baso, a person was sold in his theft, meaning to say he stole, and as a consequence of having stolen, he was sold into slavery. If he didn't have money to pay it back, he was sold in his theft. Maybe if he sold himself because he was poor. Maybe if the court sold him, he doesn't go free after 6 years. Says the verse. It says if a person is sold because he was poor, that refers to somebody who's sold on account of his poverty. That's somebody sold by the court. So there are two ways you could be sold. One is if you sell yourself, or if the court sells you. And either way, you go free after 6 years. So if you stole something, let's say you robbed the Fort Knox, and then you don't have enough money to pay it back, so the court could sell you. But the most you could go to jail for, so to speak, into servitude was 6 years. And in the 7th year, you go free. So even if you didn't pay off your debt after 6 years, that's the most you could serve. Yeah, Jerry.
But what if the theft is, let's say, $500? Must he serve a full 5 years for?
No, the most he could serve is the 6 years, but he could serve less if the debt was less. It's just if he can't afford to pay it back, then he's sold into slavery.
Okay. The example I gave my student today was the movie Overboard with Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell, where she forgets that she's a very rich woman, but she caused him a lot of loss, and so he makes her his wife until she pays the debt of the loss. So modern day Eved Ivri.
Okay, Rechavshi, in 6th year you'll go free. Yeah, Jerry, you had a question?
No, thank you.
Okay, Rechavshi will go free in 6 years. Rashi says L'cherut, he'll go into freedom. Okay, so then it says in Begapo Yavo, Begapo Yetzei, verse 3. If he came in by himself, Begapo Yavo, Rashi says when he comes in as a bachelor, Begapo Yetzei, he's going to go out as a bachelor. In Baal Ishahu, but if he's married, V'yatsa Ishto Imo. If he's married, if he marries a woman, then the wife goes out with him. Rashi tells us, Begapo Yetzei, if he goes out by Begapo Yavo, Shaloya Nasoy Isha, if he comes in and he wasn't married to anyone. Kitargumo Imbilchu Dehi, if by himself, Lashon Begapo Biknafo means in his coattails. Shaloba El Kamot Shahu, he comes as he is, Yachidi, by himself. Betochu Vusho Bechnaf Bigdo, comes with his clothing in the tail of his garment. Rashi says, "Begapo Yetze, he shall go out by himself." Magid Shem Lo Yana Mitchila, if he wasn't married, Ein Rabo Moserlo Shivcha Kananit Loid Mimena Avadim. If he wasn't married at the outset, then the master is not allowed to give him a Canaanite wife to father slaves.
Wow.
It seems like the natural reading of this is different.
And the natural reading seems to be talking about a non-Hebrew slave.
No, it says if he becomes a slave alone, he goes out alone. If he is the husband of a woman, his wife goes out with him.
Right.
If you play one of those off the other, it suggests if he comes alone, he goes out alone. If he comes with the wife, he goes out with the wife. Period. If his master gives him a woman, which could be an Israelite woman or a Canaanite woman, and she bears him.
You can't give a Hebrew a Canaanite woman. Right?
Yeah, you can give a Canaanite woman. Yeah, we're going to see that.
Rashi says only if he's already married. But if you just read the shot of the text, it suggests that if he comes in alone, he goes out alone. If he comes in married, he goes out married. But if he comes in alone and he's given a woman to be with while he's a slave, she doesn't go out with him. I understand that the rabbis understand it differently, but I'm just saying from the straight shot of the text, that seems to be the reading.
Does she have to continue to serve as
Who are we,
a term that he?
who are we talking about?
The wife?
Which wife?
The wife that comes in with him,
No, the wife, if he's given a wife. does she-
well, that she belongs to the master, so.
No,
whatever.
if it's a Hebrew wife, she can't be a slave. If it's only as a minor. A Hebrew wife could only be a slave as a minor. A Canaanite can be a slave, but a Canaanite woman could be a slave, but we'll see what the Torah says about such a slavery. So it says, "In Baal Ishahu," if he's the husband of a woman, a Yisraelis, then V'yitza Ishto Imo, then his wife goes out with him. So the Rashi tells us, "V'chi mi yachnisa shetetzeh." What are we talking about? She never became a slave in the first place, that she's going to go out with him. Elamagira Kosev Shakona Eved Ivri. So this is what the Torah tells us it's referring to. The one who acquires a Hebrew slave, Chayav v'mezonos ishto ubanav, is obligated to support his wife and his children. So if you acquire a Hebrew slave, you have to do support for the whole family, not just for the man himself. You have to pay for everybody. So that's what we're learning so far. But if he's married, then his wife goes out with him and he has to pay for her. He has to pay for her.
Could the master of a Hebrew slave prevent him from getting married while he's a slave?
He could prevent him from getting married while he's a slave. Yes, I think so.
I think he would.
I think he can. I think the Gemara Kedushin discusses that. Im Adonai v'tein lo isha. Let's say I don't think he can. The Gemara Kedushin discusses that. Im Adonai v'tein lo isha. Let's say his master will give him a wife. So we'll see what that means. V'yoldu ovanim ovanos, and then he gives birth through this woman to sons or daughters. Ha'ishavi la'adeh tiel adoneh. Then the woman and her offspring belong to her master. V'hu yetze begapo, and he goes out by himself. Verse 4. Im amor adonav. If the master will give him a wife. Mikan should be ad Rabba. Rashi tells us, this teaches us that the master has the permission. The master could say to the Hebrew slave, "I'm giving you a Canaanite woman, and you have to produce children with her." Oh, Einu Ela Israelis. Maybe it's referring to a Jewish woman. The verse says the woman and her offspring belong to the master. So we're obviously referring to a Canaanite because the Jewish women and the Jewish offspring will not belong to the master. Because the Jewish woman, she could go free in one of two ways if she's a slave, either after 6 years or when she reaches puberty, whichever comes first. So a Hebrew slave woman, she could go free in one of two ways, either 6 years or when she goes into puberty, whichever one comes first. And she is only sold by her father. She's only sold by her father as a minor. Why would her father sell her? Because he can't support her. So he has to sell her into slavery with the hope that the man will marry her. So this was their social welfare system of making sure that everybody was accounted for. They didn't have a welfare state which just didn't allow people to die on the street. They took people into their homes, but they had these legal responsibilities. So he could give him a Canaanite woman, but the woman wouldn't be his wife. Meaning to say, he could give him a Canaanite woman, but the Canaanite woman would just be basically to produce more slaves for the master. Verse 5, if the slave will say, let's say the slave will say, listen, I love my master, I love my wife, I love my children, I don't want to go free. This refers to, Ishti refers to the Canaanite woman. So what's he saying? He's saying, in addition to my own wife, we learned that he could only be assigned another wife, a Canaanite wife, if he already had a Hebrew wife. That's what the verse says. So let's say he says, I like my Canaanite wife. I want to stay in this relationship because he didn't get the opportunity to take the Canaanite wife with him. He only took his Hebrew wife. He says, I don't want to leave. He says, I like the slave life. I don't want to be free. I like the slave life. I like my Canaanite children. I like my Canaanite wife. I want to stay like this. I like not having to worry about supporting them, that you're supporting them. I like it. Slavery is good for me. It's good. It's stress-free. Yeah, I only have to serve you, and you're a pretty good master. You give me 3 meals a day. You give me a blanket and a pillow. I don't have to worry about anything. So I want to continue with this relationship. Let's say that's what he says. Let's say the master then will take him to the court. The master will take him to the door or to the doorpost. And hold on. And then the master will pierce his ears with an awl. And then he will be a slave forever. So what does it mean? If he says he doesn't want to go free, you take him to the door or the doorpost and you pierce his ear with an awl. And then he's a slave forever. Rashi tells us Elohim goes to the Beit Din, to the court. He has to consult with the sellers who sold the servant to him. Meaning to say the court sold him off, so he has to go back to the court. Take him to the door or to the mezuzah. You could think that the doorpost is a kosher place to put all through the ear. He will put the all into his ear and into the door. By the door and not into the doorpost. Why does it say to the mezuzah? Hikash del to mezuzah, ma mezuzah me'umod, af del me'uman. Meaning to say, The door has to be standing up. So basically, what you're doing is you put him next to the door and you nail his ear to the door. Then you take out the awl from the ear, but basically you had pierced his ear with an awl. Okay, so why are we doing that? The Ratzadu Nava says no, you shall bore it through his ear. Hayimanit, the right ear. Oenu el small, maybe through the left ear. Why does it mean only the right?
Why not a doorpost?
It says, Rashi's deriving it. I might think that the doorpost, no, it means you put it in the door, and not the mezuzah. So therefore, why does it say the doorpost? To tell us that the door needs to be upright. Just like the doorpost.
Because it's a contradictory psukim.
No, because otherwise it'd be called a beam. And so therefore, just like the doorpost has to be standing upright, therefore, so too the door has to be standing.
The pasuk specifically says the door or to the door.
Right, and Rashi's saying it doesn't mean to the doorpost, it means to the door. You're nailing him to the door.
And I'm trying to understand how you can just.
That's the Kiddush, that's the Gemara in Kiddush, and that's how the Gemara understands it. That it says it can't mean literally to the doorpost, it means to the door. So the Gemara, so that's how the Gemara understands it. So why does he pierce his ear with an awl? Hayimanit, the right ear, or maybe even the left. Tamalomer ozen l'gzeres. It says ear. Nemar kam ratzah don't have it does no. It says here you pierce his ear. The nemar b'mitzora, and you say by the mitzora, you tenuch ozen amitayar yaminit. You place some blood on the middle of the right ear of the one who is purified. Malalani yamanit, afkani yamanit. Just like there, it's the right. So too here is the right ear. So says the Gemara. Why is it the ear that's supposed to be bored? What is it about the ear? What is it about the ear that requires this boring through it? Mikol shar ivarim shebeguf. So Amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Ozen zos shashamal har Sinai lo tignov. This ear that heard at Mount Sinai, you shall not steal. V'alach v'ganav. And it went out and stole, Teirat, let it be bored. Wasn't listening. Vim mochar atzmon, if he sold himself, Ozen sheshama har Sinai, this ear that heard at Sinai, Kiri b'nei Yisrael abadim, the slaves, the children of Israel should be slaves to me. V'alach v'kana adon latzmo, and he went and he acquired a different master for himself. Teirat, let it be bored. So, let's just continue with the Rashi, then we'll come back and discuss it. It says, Rabbi Shimon Rabbi Shimon was expounding this verse like a packet of pearls. Why is the door and the doorpost different than all the utensils? The door and the doorpost that were witnesses in Egypt when I passed over the doorpost and the lintels, I said the children of Israel will be slaves to me. They're slaves. They're my slaves and not slaves to slaves. And he went and acquired a master for himself. Let his ear be pierced in their presence. So what Rashi is telling us is something very, very profound. Very, very profound. Extraordinarily profound. Rashi is telling us, and the word Maratseya also has to do with the Baal Turim has a beautiful gematria here connecting it to the 400 years in Egypt. But Rashi is telling us here that a person who says, I don't want to be free, is going against the whole reason why we were redeemed. A person that has to have one master, and our master is Egypt, and we have to have this strong desire for freedom. And if on some level it's easier not to be free, on some level it's easier to be a servant, to serve God, to serve a master or a human master. Very easy, but that's not our destiny. Our destiny, our responsibility is to be free before God. And a person who's trying to just check out on life, that person is missing out. And that's why he has to have his ear pierced.
So it's the equivalent of the pattern of Pesach, where the sacrifice to God is put on the lintel if you show freedom, but this is someone who's again blood on the lintel.
Exactly.
Someone who is not chosen God, who's chosen master.
Exactly. He's denying. Exactly, Shep. So 100% correct. He's denying his responsibility. He's serving his human master when he really should be serving God. He's denying his human potential. He's checking out on life. He's not reaching where he should be reaching. And that is a fundamental rejection of the whole reason why we were redeemed. And this person is missing the point of life. So therefore we have to pierce his ear with an awl. Very nice point, Shepsel, showing the parallelism. And then the verse tells us, V'avado olam, and then this person will be a slave to this master forever. Doesn't mean forever. Ada yovel means until the Jubilee year. Oenu el olam kamashmo. Maybe it means forever. Rashi says, V'isha mishpachto tashuvu. Each man will return to his family. Magid shechamishim shana kriyim olam. 50 years is called forever. Doesn't mean he's going to serve him for an entire 50 years. He serves him until the Jubilee year, whether it's a long time or far away. Okay, so this is the law of the Hebrew maidservant. And now we go into the law of the Hebrew female maidservant. This is the law of the Chayimkor Ish Espito Amar. If a man will sell his daughter, she has to be a minor, and he's going to sell her to be a maidservant. She does not go free in the manner in which the Canaanite slaves go free. What does it mean? She says, the verse is talking about a minor girl who was sold. I might think even if she's an adult, just like if she had been sold, she goes free when she has signs of being an adult, as it states, we say that if she becomes an adult, she goes free. If she was never yet sold in the first place, for sure she cannot be sold as she is an adult. We see that this whole concept of slavery was meant to protect the girl. The father didn't have any ability to protect her. He was poor. And so this was the best option that they had. It sounds so repugnant to us, but that was what they did to try to protect the girls. I mean, it's hard to really appreciate just how dangerous it was to be a girl without anybody to protect you in those days. You basically had zero protection. Okay, and so Rashi says, she shouldn't go free like the slaves go free. Not like the Canaanite slaves who go free, as we'll see, they go free with if their tooth or eye get knocked out. She doesn't go free with the tooth or the eye, but she goes free at either 6 years or until the Jubilee year, or when she produces signs. Whichever comes first gives her freedom. But if the master knocks out her tooth or eye, he has to give her the money. So then Rashi goes through, explains, maybe it means she doesn't go free the 6th year of the Jubilee year. Says the verse, when it says you sell you a male or a female, it compares a male to a female for all their departures, just like the Hebrew slave goes free in the 6th year and the Jubilee year. So, okay. So basically, we're learning that the Hebrew slave does not go free. We have to stop. But the Hebrew slave does not go free if his tooth or eye get knocked out, which is what the Canaanite slave goes free with 24 limbs being knocked out. He goes free. The Hebrew slave goes free with the tooth with 6 years, or when she becomes an adult. And if his tooth or eye gets knocked out, then the master simply has to pay him like he would have to pay any person. All right, we'll stop here and pray the afternoon prayers at this point.